Our next guest is a 27-year-old martial arts and sword manipulation artist performing in Cirque du Soleil's Axel. Joining us all the way from Boston, please welcome our friend, Alex Wu.
Hey guys, good morning.
Everybody knows the game.
Nice to have you on. I know that, even before you joined Cirque du Soleil, a lot of us fans, interacted with you because you were also a hardcore fan prior to joining Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was great because I remember, being in touch with you guys on social media, on Facebook and YouTube. So it's really nice to finally talk to you guys here.
I remember that I said something to you like, one day you'll end up on the cost stage, and it didn't actually turn out that way, but you are on the Cirque du Soleil stage now.
Yeah, and that still definitely is a goal of mine, to be on that cost stage, but to finally be on a Cirque du Soleil stage and perform with one of their shows, it's definitely a great feeling, to accomplish that goal. So it's really nice.
For those who don't know, much about you or haven't interacted with you before, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you're from and what your background is.
I was born and raised here in Boston, Massachusetts. My main discipline is Kung Fu, specifically modern wushu and traditional tiger crane style Kung Fu. I started that when I was 8 years old. When I first started, I had thought I was going to learn just all fighting, sparring, and self-defense. But it wasn't just that. It was also performance in forms. So I spent a lot of time practicing forms and traveling around the US, competing and performing, going to tournaments and stuff like that. So after some experience with, competing and stuff, I focused a little bit more on the performance aspect and actually started to choreograph some of my own routines. And then a little bit after that, I figured, I think it's, time to actively apply for something more professional like Cirque du Soleil. So after many years of training, I was able to audition a couple times, and then in 2019, I got the contract for Axel.
What was it that motivated you to go more towards that performance route?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked that question. So I competed. I started competing when I was 9, and for a few years, I traveled to many different states for tournaments and stuff. When I was in middle school, I first saw Ka in Las Vegas, and already I was a really big fan of Cirque du Soleil because the first show that I saw was Lanuba. So right after that show, I immediately fell in love with the company. So when I went to see Ka, I not only saw a really great production, but I saw that they added wushu in the show. So after seeing the show, I immediately said, okay, when I grow up, that's what I'm going to do. That's my life goal. So ever since then, I started to train really hard and focus more on my wushu skills. It was my junior year in college when I started to really actively think of applying for Cirque du Soleil, because I figured, I had some experience with going to tournaments and choreographing my own routines. So I started to, focus more on my acrobatic skills and dynamic skills. So, and actually started to do some outreach and ask some people, what is it that I should do to apply and stuff. So I first applied in 2015, and that was in Las Vegas. And actually, I didn't get in that time. Luckily, some of the people in casting were able to tell me what were some things I had to work on for next time. So I took their advice and I just did nothing but trained and worked on the stuff that they told me to. And then fast forward to 2018, I was able to audition again in LA. The audition was not only for the database, but it was actually also for Run, because they were just starting to create, um, well, yeah, just starting to create the stuff for Run. So they were looking for stunt people and martial artists. So I figured I'll go and try to get into their database and ultimately get into Run. And actually, during that time, they didn't come up with Run as the title. They didn't know what the title was going to be actually when we auditioned. So once the audition and got into the database, so a few weeks after the audition, they said that, hey, we're gonna consider you to be in the show. Are you interested? So and I said, oh, absolutely. I definitely am interested. And it got me really excited because I thought, wow, so not only did I just get into the database, but it's going to be a really quick turnaround where I'm going to be leaving Boston and heading to Vegas to be a part of the new show. But it took a really long time to get a final answer. So I'd say maybe 5 or 6 months later, they said, this time around we didn't select you to be in the show, but at the same time they said you're still being considered, you're still in the database, so in the future we might call you if there's an opening that fits your skill set. So I said, all right. So I mean, I was obviously bummed because I had thought that I was going to get it, but I knew that there were going to be other opportunities because getting to the database is the hardest thing to do. So a few months after that is when they called me for Axel, and it's pretty interesting because when they first called me about the role for Axel, they said at first they were looking for a female martial artist to be in the show, but I guess they couldn't find someone to fit that role, so they switched the role to a male character, and then that's when they first contacted me, and then I said yes, of course, I'm definitely interested. I never thought that I'd be in a touring production because I always thought that COD is like the only show from Cirque du Soleil that has martial arts in it. So I figured, all right, I'll get into a database and then eventually be in that show. Never in my life thought that I'd be in a touring production with them. So I told them I was interested, and then about a week later they said, all right, you got selected. So I was definitely walking on cloud nine after that.
Let's go back. Can you tell us a little about your first audition process? Like, what was the experience like, and how were you feeling, because that was your first audition back in 2015?
Yeah, it was really interesting because with the audition, I've never auditioned for anything before, before auditioning for Cirque du Soleil. So going into the whole application process, I had no clue what I was getting into. So the first step of the audition process was that we had to apply online. And even with that, I didn't really know what to show them. So I figured I'll just show them like my best forms and maybe add in a couple flips here and there and just see how they like it. Luckily, they liked what they saw in my online application, so they invited me to audition in Vegas. So the first thing that they had us do was just to present to them like a 1.5 minute piece. So they told us that we were going to do that, at the audition when they sent me the first email. So I figured, all right, so what am I going to do to show them in 1 minute? And they want us to show them like our best skills. So I had to basically go from, choreographing, you know, like a full routine for competition to just like a condensed one. And it's like, what do I do with that? You know, so I basically combined um, a hand form and a sword routine into like one, you know, choreographed set to show them. So that's what I did. Um, and then after all of the artists showing them their 1 minute piece, they wanted us to show them just acrobatics. And that kind of threw a curveball at me because I didn't think they would want me to show them just acrobatics. And I mean, I worked a little bit on my tumbling and stuff, but really, honestly, the only thing that I worked on was just the routine that I had to show them. So I showed them, you know, one hand form and then like a couple round offs and the round off back somersaults, and that's it. And then it's funny because during that time, like I was really hesitant on what to show them. So I kind of hiccups there. So after that, you know, they had a little team meeting, and then right after that, they called me and they said, okay, um, when the casting guy first said, okay, first of all, thank you guys for coming, I I knew. I was like, oh man, that doesn't sound good. Because when they first start off with, you know, first off, thank you for coming, it, you know, what they say is not gonna end well. So that whole day, it it didn't really feel good because, you know, it's like you work so hard for, you know, so many years to, you know, to accomplish this like life goal that you have, and to get cut, you know, so quickly, it's like, oof, man, you know, it's a lot to take in. Um, so it definitely took a really long time to recover from that audition. Um, but you know, like after that is basically just back to the drawing board, and you know, going back and just thinking of what I need to do to improve, and then just spent the next few years just really improving my skills.
Were there other production companies that you were eyeing during those couple of years outside of Cirque du Soleil?
Yeah, Cirque du Soleil was the only one that I was thinking of applying for, because it was the only thing that I knew about. Before, when I was really young, I saw this live production that was created by the Shaolin monks. Is this huge show that was just about, you know, the Shaolin monks, and they showed their skills and stuff. So um, I had thought, oh, maybe I could do something like that, but it wasn't as serious as like applying for Cirque du Soleil.
Going back to that COD question. So obviously, COD was your main goal. That's what you were auditioning for. But did you, at any point, did you think, okay, maybe because if since you're doing martial arts and COD was really at that time the only show that had martial arts, you know, your opportunities were very limited because you would only, if you were doing martial arts, you would only fit in one show. At any point did you think like, you know, maybe I am not going to go necessarily into my you know, your discipline? Did you think like, I will be okay if I didn't perform my discipline in front of an audience, if I had to do if I was hired on as sort of an acrobat, and then you learn something new to be on a Cirque du Soleil show?
Definitely. And I think a lot of people know that when you apply for Cirque du Soleil, you have to go out of your comfort zone. And that's something that they focus on a lot, is they tell people, you know, when you're applying, you're not necessarily going to be doing just something in your discipline. You're going to have to do something that's definitely like out of your comfort zone, out of stuff that you're really used to doing. Um, but you know, that's a part of show business. You know, when you go into professional productions, like the ones that Cirque du Soleil has, you're gonna do stuff that's a lot different. You're gonna do stuff that's stuff that you're gonna do stuff that you've never done before. So I knew, you know, going into this that there's gonna be stuff that I'm gonna be doing possibly that I'm going to be afraid of. But if that's stuff that I have to do, then hey, it's whatever it takes.
What was the most challenging thing in terms of that to adapt to? Like, what new thing was thrown at you?
So I think, well, the first thing that was a little bit of a challenge, and actually it wasn't too bad, was so when I compete and perform, I'm used to using a really big space, because when I do the routines, I go all over, you know. So when they said, because, and mind you, the Axel is an on ice production, so I had thought, okay, they're probably going to want me to do martial arts on ice, you know. So I told them, you know, I don't know how to skate. So if that's, you know, the deal breaker, then I understand. But then they're like, oh, no, don't worry. With your number, you know, you're going to have a dry platform, so you don't have to skate. So you don't have to worry about that. They're like, okay, great. So I go to headquarters for the creation process of the show. And the first day when we work on the routine, they show me the platform, and it's this small, like 15 by 15 circle of a platform. Something, oh boy, okay, this is a curveball. This is where, you know, I'm going out of my comfort zone here. You know, so I'm thinking, all right, so how am I gonna go from a really big ring doing stuff to this small circle? But you know, luckily they had some great choreographers that helped me put together a routine within that circle, and obviously it was really a challenge to work within that space. But after a while of, you know, getting used to the platform and stuff, I was able to get it down. I was able to get comfortable with that space, so it was great. But the getting out of the whole comfort zone thing doesn't end there. So when they introduced me the whole part of using the fire swords, obviously I was a little bit scared because I had never handled anything with fire. And I'll be honest with you, I was already afraid of like holding a lighter, you know, because I mean, I'm not used to, you know, having fire next to me or holding fire or anything like that, you know. So the first day they had me try using the fire swords, they, you know, they lit the sword on fire, and literally my arm was just like fully extended out. I was like, okay, what now? And they're like, all right, just start moving it. No, but they told me how to, you know, move it, and basically they were like, you know, just to keep it at a constant motion. Don't forget any moves, any movements that you do with the regular sword. It's no different. Just to keep it a constant motion, and then you should be fine. So like, all right, so gave it a try, and it was definitely scary because I mean I've never had that much fire so close to me. So when I'm holding the fire sword, you definitely feel the heat. So after a few tries of using the sword and stuff and swinging it, I was like, okay, I guess it's not too bad. So the first time they had me try the first time they had me try out the fire swords, it was just the blade, just the stick that was on fire, and that was okay. So the next thing they had me do was trying out the stick, where at the end of the stick there's a small pouch filled with a powder that's flammable. So when you swing the stick, there's a big tail of fire that follows it because the powder, you know, it flies out. So the fire, it catches onto the powder, so it makes that big fire tail. So I said, oh, okay. So it's adding even more fire to the thing. So it's even scarier. So luckily they had me all up in like fireproof stuff. So I was well protected, but still it was really scary. So after a few tries, it was scary, but then slowly got used to it. And then after like maybe the third or fourth time trying it out, I actually ended up getting like a little bit of an adrenaline rush because it's like, okay, this is pretty cool. Because I mean, nothing bad's happening to me. You know, I'm not burnt, so I'm still fine. So I tried again. So I did it more and more. And then after that, I actually ended up really enjoying it. And it ended up being one of my favorite things to do. So like, all right, cool. So it's a nice new skill that I have under my belt. So it's really cool.
So you're no longer afraid of fire?
No, and I can most definitely hold the lighter if I had to.
Okay, so you first auditioned in 2015, and then in 2018 you auditioned again in LA.
Yeah.
And you know, it was for database and it was for run. But you did not get chosen for run. But then
Right.
was it 6 months later that you got the call for Axel?
So I auditioned in September of 2018 in LA and got into the database there. And 6 months after that is when I got the call for Axel.
So then about a week later you were flying out to Montreal.
Yes. So after I got the call for Axel, um, I only had maybe 2 weeks here in Boston to finish stuff up for my original job, and and plan stuff for traveling and get my stuff ready for headquarters.
So what are you feeling on your way to Montreal from Boston? I mean, you finally, this
And
was, you know,
yeah,
this was one of your goals, and you know, you finally accomplished that. So what are you feeling?
well, definitely feeling excitement, because but honestly, for the most part, I'm thinking, wow, I can't believe this is actually happening to me. Because for the longest time, basically, like ever since um, so after I first saw Ka, like I set that life goal for me to, audition and be part of Cirque du Soleil. So you're talking maybe like 10, 12 years of wanting this goal, of really wanting it too, and being really passionate for, being part of Cirque du Soleil. On my way to Montreal, obviously, I'm excited, but most of the time I'm thinking, man, I can't believe this is actually happening. Like this is real life now. Because the whole time it was just like a goal of mine. And for the most part, I was just wondering if this goal is ever even going to happen to me, you know? So, um, I was definitely excited though. I didn't really know what to expect either, because not only was I going into a show, but I was going into the creation process of a show, a brand new show that they're trying to make.
Now you're in Montreal after, you know, 12 years of wanting to be on Cirque du Soleil, and you're starting a brand new production, which is Axel. So walk us through, you know, the creation process. How long did it take? What was it like?
Yeah, the creation process was really interesting. When I had the first conference call with them, they told me briefly what the show was going to be about, but with obviously, with the very brief details that they gave me, I still didn't know what to expect with the show, especially because it's an on ice production. I mean, we heard about Crystal, but I've never seen Crystal, so I didn't know what the show was going to look like. And not only was it going to be an on ice show, but there's also going to be martial arts in the show. And I mean, we've never seen a show like that before with martial arts in it. So I obviously didn't know what I was getting into. Um, I had no clue what the show was going to look like, with my skills in it, like with the set routine that I'm going to have. So during the first meeting at IHQ, they explained to me more what the show is going to be about, what it's going to look like. They had like the whole board filled with pictures of each act and tried to give me like a general description of what each act is going to look like with the pictures. And then they got into my number and they showed me like the costume and stuff. I was like, oh, okay, it looks it it makes a little bit more sense. So the way they described it was with my character, they didn't give me a name for the character, but they said that I'm basically the master syndicate. So I know some of you guys didn't see the show yet, so I'll just explain. Syndicates is a group of characters in the show that are mainly freestyle skaters, and they're supposedly the quote unquote like the good guys. They're the friends of the one of the main characters, Soleil, and they basically help her throughout the whole journey in the show. So what I do is I basically help Lay and the syndicates train martial arts for a battle at the end of Act 1. So yeah, in my routine, I teach them basically how to fight, with the staffs, and basically preparing them for the battle at the end of Act 1. So in that routine, I start off with a small the staff piece, and then after that, I transition into sword and then double sword. So actually, in the beginning of the creation process, they had me do a lot of stuff. So in the beginning of the creation process of the show, they actually had my routine to be 4.5 minutes. And I thought, okay, that's great, so 4.5 minutes, to show off my skills. But when I actually physically started to work on the routine, I was like, okay, it's pretty exhausting, physically, but after I work on it a few times, my body would get used to it, fine. So towards the end of the creation process, we actually had one of the guys from Ka, his name's JJ. He came to help me with the routine, and he actually said 4.5 minutes, it's too long, because with the martial arts routine, in any production, 4.5 minutes is pretty long and too tiring for just one person. If it was a group of people, then that's a different story, but it's just you doing the martial arts, so you definitely have to cut it down to a shorter routine. So okay, like that makes sense. So we actually cut it down from 4.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes, and that's a lot, but it actually helped me greatly, because it wasn't as tiring, and the choreography, it was a lot better, so it was a lot more comfortable for me. So now in the routine, I do a staff, like a staff piece, and then I end it with double swords.
And how long was that creation process?
So the creation process, it lasted from, well, for me, it lasted from like beginning of July till beginning of September. So it was most of the summertime. And actually, I came in after most of the cast arrived at headquarters. So most of the cast people, they were there for a good month before I joined in. And I think it's because after they came in to start the creation process, they were still trying to figure out what to do for my role. Because they couldn't find a female for the role, they switched to the male character, and then that's when they contacted me. So it took some time for them to switch the description and to contact me and stuff.
Tell us about Axel, because I think a lot of people who haven't seen the show may not necessarily know what the show is about, because it is, when you look at the the trailer or images of the show, it looks very different than all the other Cirque du Soleil shows, even Crystal, that it's a nice show.
So I think a lot of people, they thought that Axel was going to be a lot like Crystal, because Crystal is the first on ice production that Cirque du Soleil created. So I think a lot of people thought that with Axel, it's going to be very similar, just different characters, but actually it's very different. So Axel is about this boy named Axel, and the show is basically about a story that he creates. So in his story, he creates this girl who's actually, you know, in his reality, his crush, and her name is Lay. So in Axel's story, the main character, Lay, has this light that's very special to her. So in the beginning of the story, this villain, Vi, takes that light from her. So basically, throughout the whole story, Axel and Lay is trying to get this light back. So during this journey that they're in, they meet all these different characters, me being one of them. So at the end of the story, they finally get the light back and they supposedly kill off Vi. So they get the light back, and then at the end of the show, I think Axel wants to take that light and he wants to share that light with everyone.
Tell us about, you know, that day you got a call, or, you know, the video, or however you got notified that, you know, you were taking a break from the show. Like, how did you feel? I mean, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, we were just going to start our tour in the West Coast. We were in Bakersfield during the time, and for a week we were rehearsing and stuff. But during that week of rehearsal, we already, you know, got the news about the pandemic being really bad and getting worse. So we heard about, you know, potential cancellations and stuff. And actually, it first started off with just San Jose being canceled. And we thought, you know, it's disappointing, but, you know, at least we still have Vegas and the other places for the tour. And it's just one state that's being canceled. That's okay. And I thought that it was just going to end at that, and we were still going to, you know, tour and stuff. I didn't think it would end, you know, for most of the year. The day before our first day in Bakersfield, we got an email from the director, is basically saying that, you know, our production is going to go dark until November. And, you know, for all of us, it was really tough to comprehend, because not only is our show going dark, you know, for a while, but it's till November. So that's like basically for the whole year, you know. So even to now, like, it's hard to comprehend that, man, like, we had basically just started going on tour and, you know, enjoying the tour life and stuff. And it just all of a sudden had to just end so abruptly. So literally on that same day, we all just packed up all of our stuff and had to leave. So yeah, after that day, I traveled to my home in Vegas and I isolated there for a few months. And after that, I came back here to my Boston home.
I mean, what does an artist do when they're not able to perform? What have you been up to? How are you spending this whole quarantine, you know, at home?
So honestly, for the most part, I've been wondering if we'll actually be able to go back on tour, because with something like this, it's unpredictable. This pandemic, it brings a new day every day for everyone. So what happens in the future is definitely unpredictable. Like, we could be hopeful that there's a good outcome in the end and we'll actually be able to go back to our touring stuff in November. At the same time, I just do my best to, you know, focus on what I'm doing currently and not think too much into the future, and not worry too much.
Are you still, you know, training at home?
Oh yeah, so actually, well, when I was in my Vegas home, I didn't really have many places to train. The backyard that I had only had enough space for a barbecue. So I didn't have much space to train and stuff. But now that I'm back here in my Boston home, I have my backyard that it's like a quarter of an acre, so I can do some stuff now. And it's nice. And it's interesting because for like 4+ months, I didn't do anything martial arts related, like no training. So just yesterday, I tried to do some stuff, and my body is like, "What the heck are you doing?" you know? So my body is definitely, trying to get used to it. But I think after training for about a week, like I'll I'll be able to get back into it.
Are you still keeping in contact with the other performers from the show?
Oh yeah, yeah. Some of them, asking them how they're doing, and they're kind of on the same boat. They're really hoping that we can actually, go back on tour, but also, thinking, with the reality of things, how it's really unpredictable. We're not sure what's going to happen. So the most we can do is just to make the most out of what we have right now, and just to do the best that we can, and just see what happens from there.
Is Cirque du Soleil in contact with you guys, the artists, about this whole situation, like what's going on, or what the expectation is as far as eventually returning?
Oh, they do. Yeah, and obviously I can't go into specifics, but what I do appreciate is that anything that they do, they stay in contact with us, because it's not one of those things where it's a company where they just keep to themselves. They care about all of the artists, so any updates that they have, they update us too. So they want us to know that we're involved with all of the stuff too.
Obviously, we're hoping that all the shows, go get back to where they were and they start touring again. So when I'm not going to say if Axel, I'm going to say when Axel comes back, why should people go see the show?
Well, one, because it's a much different on ice production than Crystal. It's a lot different than what a lot of people anticipate. What I really appreciate about Axel is that it's a totally new type of show that Cirque du Soleil created. The music is very upbeat. The theme of it is kind of like an 80s vibe, retro type of feel. And actually, that's the stuff that I go for too. So I do love my 80s theming and music and stuff.
Describe Axel in one word.
Okay, in one word, I'd probably say riveting. And I say that not to try and sound cliche, but just thinking about everything that happens in Axel, when it comes to like the music, the artists, the acts, the costumes, and just the colors, everything that's put into the show. I mean, obviously, it's a lot different than the other productions. It's not your typical like big top production. It's arena. It's on ice. It's only the second on ice production that Cirque du Soleil created. So you don't really know what to expect with an on ice show. But after seeing what they have to offer in the show, considering it's on ice, it's like there's really a whole lot to it. And after seeing the show, a lot of people say like, man, like when they want to talk about like when they want to review the show, they don't really know where to start because so much happens. So we have a lot to offer in the show for sure. So I think so I think what I could say for now is that it's riveting just because of how much is put into the show and what people see. So one thing I want to actually add is one of the things that inspired me a lot, especially after being rejected in 2015 when I first auditioned, is watching the interview that you guys did with RJ Owens. I remember one thing that he said, and that was just 3 things: see, feel, and do. That actually stuck with me a lot. because during my training, I kept that in mind. And just thinking about everything that he said to you guys in that interview, and that helped me greatly, you know, just continuing my training and just taking the first audition as okay, it's just a step into, you know, reaching my goal, and just helping me, you know, reach it. So it was really cool. That interview, I saw probably, I watched that maybe like 10 times, not gonna lie.